I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. I'm here today with Mick McCulley, field CTO, and Jamie Smith, product marketing director at Snyk, the developer security company. To learn more about our sponsor, visit snyk.io. Welcome, Mick and Jamie. It's great to have you both with us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Glad to be here.
So, Mick, before we get started, for anybody who's watching and might not know, what is a supply chain cyber attack?
So a software supply chain attack is something that basically takes advantage of any aspect of the process of building software. It could be anything from the individual that's writing the code to the components that they use inside of it, such as open source containers, to anything that's used along the process of actually creating, deploying, testing, and ultimately moving to production, and even including the production environments, right? As everybody moves to the cloud become part of the software supply chain. So any one of those aspects has the potential to be compromised.
So, Mick, when we had your founder, Guy, with us, he said that Snyk is investing a ton into supply chain security. And he said it's basically what you've been doing as a company since day one. So I'm curious, when you go down the list of the responsibilities, everything that's on the plate for a CISO, a security leader, how important is this?
It definitely has been in our DNA since day one. I think Guy and the rest of the co-founders early on realized that developers were taking advantage of the fact that open source packages made development processes much more fast, right? The fact that you could take something that was already built. Interesting enough, that means ingesting somebody else's code, right? So the risk associated with it automatically started to ingest risk into your software creation process. So that's been in our DNA. And as we've seen sort of this evolution of many aspects of applications turning into code, we've actually put a big focus on helping organizations as much as possible assess that risk, address it, remediate it before it becomes something that you're exposed to. So it is in our DNA, right? Like helping organizations associated with the security controls, insight, and fixing any sort of risk associated with the software supply chain is a big part of our focus.
So, Jamie, when we had Guy on, he said, this is just a really messy space. And I think he meant that, it's difficult to understand, but he really, drove home the point that Snyk has great resources, great people, and that you talk to a lot of CISOs, you talk to a lot of security leaders. Before we dive into what Snyk does insofar as your platform and product, talk to us about the people. Who do you have there, and what types of resources are there when they make those inquiries?
So really with Snyk, we have these underlying defining values. One of those is one team. So from that standpoint, everybody's in marketing and everybody's also in customer success. So everybody's striving to make sure our customers, whether they're paying customers or free customers, they are getting value out of the product. So in that case, when they're like from a sales process standpoint, any customers can be assigned, an account exec and dedicated pre-sales engineers. And as they're trying to move on their journey, they're going to be talking to people, potentially subject matter experts in the different areas. So we have pre-sales engineers that kind of know the whole platform. And there are some that are really dedicated to specific areas, whether it be supply chain, containers, and depending on the needs, like what kind of questions they're asking, they might be talking to the product managers, the people that are helping define the roadmap, set the goals of where we're going. On the other standpoint, we've also got a dedicated team of people like developer relations and again, like technical success managers. They can really be talking to any of these people. So like if, pretty much if somebody has a question, we're a real Slack heavy team. We find people that are going to know the answer and go from there.
So one of the things I really like about Snyk is your tagline, and not just because it's catchy, but because it's accurate and because we talk to so many CISOs, and it's just so easy to say, well, they're the developer security company. We're in a very gnarly space, and it's very difficult for a lot of companies to explain who they are, what they do. That's a great, 30,000 foot view on the company name. Maybe you could take it from there, Jamie, and talk to us about the products and exactly what Snyk offers.
Real quick preface before that, it's like there are a couple of terms that we talk about a lot. There's like developer aware security and security aware development. And those concepts really kind of define the way we build the products. Developer aware security is, developers, they need to know that they can't just go out and grab just some random thing and include it in their code. They've got to, follow practices. The other side is developer aware security, is that the security teams need to know how developers work. The developers, they live in their tools, they're comfortable in their tools. And that's really where we're putting our efforts to make sure that developers aren't having to get out of their normal workflow to build applications. They start out in their IDE, they're coding, and they're thinking, all right, open source has really changed the way people are doing applications in that I don't need to go out and write my own sort utility. I don't need to write my own certificate verification things. I can pull in libraries to do that. And that's what they're doing. So, it's saving time a lot faster to time to value in their applications. So across the supply chain, the areas that we focus on, we've got Snyk code, which helps developers write better code, find potential issues in the way they write their code. Snyk open source is as they're selecting these libraries, as they're selecting open source projects or third-party projects to help let them build applications faster, we help them select the right ones. We help them with tools, saying, hey, the one you're using, the library you've chosen, it's out of date. Maybe it's not being maintained anymore. And a lot of these things translate into some sort of score to tell them how stable the environment is that they've chosen these libraries. And then container, there's a similar story. A lot of the things, 70% of the code that you're writing is probably coming from outside the organization, and helping developers in their tools, rather than figure out what is the right version and going to try to figure out where should I be using this, which one should I be using, we can help them help them by saying, this is the one that you want to be using, and make it even easier. Like, you can just click a button and it's going to automatically do a pull request. Again, this is all in the same kind of workflow that developers are using. So in that case, our focus is making sure, we're helping security teams by empowering the developers, but all the work that we're doing is really helping those developers be better at coding more secure applications without having to become security experts.
So, Mick, I need you to connect the dots here for us between developers and security because, they're largely considered part of, quote, IT, the IT organization, or often an organization unto themselves. They're generally not part of the security organization. So how do you embrace them, and how do, the CISOs and security leaders work with them?
I think we're seeing, and I've seen this theme probably with a lot of CISOs recently, is switching to a concept of CISO of yes. Right? How do I stop from trying to stop things and block things to how do I enable the business to actually do what they want to, but do so in a secure fashion? And with this sort of explosion of applications, the fact that everybody's moving to the cloud, they're going through digital transformation, developers are ultimately involved in a lot of the origination of decisions and risks and introduction of risks. And so bridging that gap, I think it's a bidirectional sort of approach. One of them, and Jamie alluded to this just a little bit ago, is training and making developers aware of security, but it's doing so by also educating them and helping them understand the importance. And it has to be a focus of the entire organization, or it's not a priority of any individual if it's not of the entire company. The other piece is that security needs to be aware of what development does. And this has been a tricky area, is the fact that, if you don't know how they work and the components they use and the processes associated with it, it makes it very difficult to try to inject sort of traditional security processes, traditional security tools into something that doesn't map very well to. So that sort of component, I think it means that there needs to be a communication between the two of them. It's also why we've seen sort of this DevSecOps drive that still needs to incorporate all of these fundamental values, right? Understanding how they work and sharing sort of the importance and prioritization of security in order to ensure that it still allows the business to do what they need to do, but using the securest approach to actually solving those problems.
So, Jamie, I want to ask you some questions about Snyk's resources. We had a couple of editors out on your site, and they were actually surprised by what they found, the depth of information. One of them said, wow, this is like a primer for developer security. We don't often see that on vendor websites. And I took a look at some of the material. Snyk's going to be sponsoring our 2023 Software Supply Chain Security Report. Tell us a little bit about, where all of those resources come from and what CISOs and security leaders can find out there on your site.
As you said, we're really trying to share with developers information about security and about issues and things that they might encounter, but trying to do it in such a way that it's not like, a PhD level course, the words of things that they can understand and that have impact and value. We've got Snyk Learn. It's really like a free resource meant to help developers gain like essential security skills. There's live on-demand workshops, more things. There's also Snyk Advisor. That's a place to go and say, I'm starting a project. I'm not a customer yet. I'm going to go pick an open source library to do something. I can go in there and find out, do research on those libraries and get a lot of the same insights that I'm going to get in the tools that we talked about earlier. A lot of this comes from the fact that we've got a dedicated research team. Snyk is a company that can actually find vulnerabilities and put them in the database, and they're actually uncovering these things themselves. And really, this is a learning knowledge share sort of thing. Outside of that, we've got Guy Bajarni. He's got his own podcast. It's called The Secure Developer. This isn't even a Snyk thing. This is just a respected podcast within the software security ecosystem, I'll say, that he has guests from other companies, CISOs, things like that. And they cover a lot of the bases of, hot topics, vulnerabilities, or just best practices from a content standpoint, things that you think about like blogs, white papers, things like that. We've got things at multiple levels. So there's going to be stuff for developers or AppSec, and of course, higher level things for CISOs, looking to get, they want that top down view to make sure that they might not care about which piece of software you're using, but they want to be able to know when we're going to be able to address the next vulnerability that comes out and that we're going to know how to handle it. We had a recent piece from OpenSSL. There was a vulnerability came out at the end of last year. It was supposed to be a critical. Everybody had visions of like the next heartbleed, things like that. They downgraded it, but it was a good piece to sit there and say, all right, great. If this was an emergency, what would we have done? Would we have been ready for it? And that's the kind of stuff that we like to put out there, some how-to things for, I'm a security leader. I need to know, hey, we dodged a bullet this time, but where can we go?
So last question for you, Mick. I'd like to look at, where we go from here. Recently, we had the CISO from Northwell Health come on with us. They're New York State's largest private employer, largest healthcare system in the state. They have about 82,000 employees. And she brought their VP of Application Security on and said that they talk to each other every week, and that collaboration is just critical. And it's the first time that I heard that from a CISO, and it's the first time that they brought somebody on like that. But are we maybe, moving in that direction? I hope.
I definitely believe so. I mean, when you start to look at your risk and your risk exposure, like CISOs are definitely, they're focused on all aspects of the business, right? Protecting the data, protecting the assets, protecting all of these components from adversaries. And when you look at how every organization is a software company of sorts nowadays, right? Like there's some sort of presence of every sort of organization, whether or not they're working with their other partners, whether or not this is just direct to consumer sort of applications, but there's a significant amount of their business that turns into applications, which means the exposure associated with the risk now starts to go outside of your bounds, right? And it's embedded inside of those applications, and the risk of accessing the information that's underneath those applications is inherent to the risk embedded inside of that code. So it makes it a critical part of ensuring that the security controls in place are there to protect all of those important assets, right? Like if you look at most applications, they sit on top of some of the most mission critical data, whether it's purchasing, right? Any sort of portal. A lot of that has tremendous amounts of information about your customers, the data, your intellectual property might be underneath all of those applications. So this just becomes one of those paths that I think is very important that CISOs are realizing that it's a critical part of their infrastructure, right? That they have to keep these controls. And it's one that's exposed to the internet, which means the amount of adversaries, right, is exponential.
Well, thank you for that, Mick. And Jamie, thank you as well for joining us today. I hope you'll come back on.
Great. Thanks for having us.
I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. Joining us today was Mick McCulley, field CTO, and Jamie Smith, product marketing director at Snyk, the developer security company. To learn more about our sponsor, visit snyk.io. You can keep up with all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.